Boker Tov, everyone. Moda ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatecha. I give thanks to you, God, for giving me another day. Great is your act of confidence or faith in us. We're going to learn today about Birkat HaMazon. I'm going to share a screen, but let's join together in our bracha. Baruch atah
אתה
Adonai
אדוני
Eloheinu
אלוהינו
melech
מלך
haolam
העולם,
asher
אשר
kitshanu
קידשנו
b'mitzvotav
במצוותיו.
v'tzivanu lasok b'divrei Torah. And here is the pasuk, the verse that is the focal point of our study, that this one little line creates an entire universe of prayer. That's one of the most common prayers in traditional circles there could possibly be, because it's a prayer you say anytime you eat bread products. So let's take a very quick look at this. I thought maybe we would also look at the verses right before it. For Adonai your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat food without stint, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron and from whose hills you can mine copper. When you have eaten your fill, give thanks to Adonai your God for the good land which God has given you. V'achalta v'savata uverachta et Adonai Elohecha al haaretz hatova asher natan lach. That is the pasuk. That is the basis for all of this. Let's break it down. It says, V'achalta, you shall eat. Visavata, you shall feel soba or satisfaction or satiation. Uverachta et Adonai Elohecha al haaretz hatover. I'm going to say the whole line as a third part. And you shall bless Adonai your God for the land, the good land which he gave to you. So you eat, you get full, and you make a blessing for the land which God gave you. Now, this is a nuanced thing because I think people just take away the land part. In fact, I think as Zionists, we have to reinsert it because this is Torah, and there's this claim that everything that Israel is represents colonialism and 20th century thinking, as if there was no relationship to the land. And yet the entire book of Deuteronomy is all about the entry into the land. And this pasuk really reinforces that because there's causality that's presented that is sort of an indirect one. You eat, you get full, and you make a blessing. And people usually stop there. And in many ways, I'm going to present it as if you stop there. But to you, in the advanced class that our little community is, I want to point out there's all this other stuff about what are you blessing? You're blessing God for the good land which God gave to you. So that is no doubt a point of uh, relationship to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, that goes back to the Torah itself. This is not a fly by night notion by Western European colonialist settlers who somehow pretend that Jews are, just a part of the gang. It's very important that we see that. Welcome, Brad. I was just pointing out the verse from Book of Deuteronomy that is saying that you should eat, you should get full, and you should bless. What are you blessing? Not for the food specifically, but actually for the land on which that food is grown, and it's contextualized by reference up above to this land that is a good land and the seven species, right? This is known as Shivat Haminim, the seven species, a land where wheat, barley, vines, figs, pomegranates, olives, and date honey are able to thrive and nourish our bodies. So one, I'll just throw out, this is a little, personalization. Notice that this is not a land where cows are grazing. It is a vegan world. Hey, but anyway, we'll keep going here. Okay, so the important thing here also, in addition to recognizing that this pasuk is all about, or verse is all about thanking or blessing God for the land that upon which we were granted by God, there's also the idea here that there's a sequence of events. First, you eat, then you get full, and then you make a blessing. That's why we have Birkat Hamazon. We have a blessing over the food. And that blessing is a sense in this verse of causality. You eat, you get full, you make a blessing. So unlike most traditions where you say a prayer before you eat, oh God, thank you for the food that we're about to eat, we're so grateful. And we have that. We have hamotzi, right? Hamotzi just says, blessed are you, God, who takes lechem, bread, from the land. But we, as Jews, say, okay, it's easy to say to God, thanks for the food right before we eat it. But when we're full and have indigestion and we're stressed out, we still remember that the source of all of this food is the God that gave us land upon which to eat. Now, I presented this as if the reason we offer the blessing is because we are, grateful for the land itself. So let's take a look at what the Ramban says. I pulled that up here as well. This is his commentary on this verse. He says, and thou shalt eat and be satisfied and bless the eternal thy God for the good land. This is obviously a translation. He is stating that when you remember the bondage in Egypt and the affliction in the wilderness, and you will eat and be satisfied in the good land, you will bless God for it. So he associates the bracha, this Birkat Hamazon, with the memories of enslavement and our suffering in the wilderness. And then, despite all of this hardship, we will eat and be satisfied in the good land. You will bless God for it. Okay, so he basically is merging both the idea of the consumption as being a blessing that we're going to give thanks for, and also, people will say that Ramban, Nachmanides, right, was a little bit more toward the Zionist perspective. Obviously, he's not even a proto-Zionist. We're talking 1,000 years before political Zionism, but his association with the land of Israel was very real. I think he lived there for a bit, but I can't remember the bio of Nachmanides. Nachmanides was a very important teacher, and there are good commentaries, translations of this, and here we have one of them. And our rabbis have received by tradition that this is a positive commandment, right? So this is noting, if we have 613, this is one of the commandments to say Birkat Hamazon. It's not just a nice thing to do. It's actually a mitzvah. It's a commandment. And its meaning thus being, you shall bless, thou shalt bless Adonai your God. Similarly then, thou shalt make a parapet for thy roof, and thou shalt keep the Passover, and thou shalt take of the first of all the fruit of the ground. And so also many similar verses, which appear to be mere optional, but are nevertheless interpreted as commandments. Just because it sounds like a nice thing to do. So interestingly, this is kind of a contradiction, just the way he's saying it, to the idea that a mitzvah is a good deed, right? This is saying, even if it sounds like a good deed, it's also a commandment. People will get it the other way around. They'll say, oh, if it's a commandment, then we're going to just think of it as a good deed. He's saying, no, actually, if it's actually something that's good to do or nice to do, it's actually to be understood as a mitzvah or a commandment. Everybody following that? Okay, someone might be at my door. Hold on one moment. Sorry, everybody. Hello. Hi.
Oh, click on my name.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So the meaning of the expression for the good land and for the good land, that is, God commands that you are to bless God at all times for the food you eat to satisfaction, and for the land that God gave you in order that you might have it forever as an inheritance and be satisfied with its goodness. So what you're hearing from him is there's two reasons that we offer this bracha. We offer it because we're giving thanks for the good land, but also for the food itself. Thus, the obligatory nature of this commandment is in all places, right? If it was only about the land, well, then if you're not living in the land, then there's no obligation. We have that in other contexts. Lately, I have been not saying tal umatar when we have the Amidah, even though it's written as something you're obligated to do, because out of my Zionism, I decided that I'm going to commit to the way Ashkenazic Jews do it, not the way the Reform movement does it. It's a little subtle thing, but during the Amidah, we have this thing where we say tal umatar, right? That addition, according to Ashkenazic tradition, was always done only in the land of Israel. So there is a component here of thinking about that overlay. And I bring this out heavily because it's going to play a role when we actually look at Birkat Hamazon. Birkat Hamazon is, in many ways, a Zionist prayer. And we'll talk about that later. Thus, the obligatory nature of this commandment is in all places, even outside the land of Israel, since the commandment to bless God for the food that we eat is independent of the duty to bless God for the land that God has given us. Okay, so just to reiterate, this is a dual-purposed prayer. We're both saying this prayer because, we are acknowledging the blessing of the food that we've had, and we are also acknowledging the land that God has given us. Any questions or comments up to this point? I'd love to actually get this clarification before we go into the prayers itself.
I mean, I think it's hello, Captain Obvious, but I think it is important to thank the earth for giving us the great food the nourishment that we are getting.
So there's a third idea here that you're suggesting, which I think is in concert with other aspects of this prayer. The two that are stated in the Torah lend themselves to a corollary, if you were thinking mathematically. Yeah. The corollary is it's not just about the goodness of the food or the goodness of the land, but it's the goodness of the land that produces food and the fact that the environment matters and that we have to be grateful that we still have a functional planet that enables us to benefit from food. And it's a reminder to think through what happens if that goes away. Okay, other questions or comments?
Just the connection to the land, our land. It's all through the Amidah. It's about, and the rains should come when the rain in Eretz Yisrael should come. We're not talking about the Midwest it's very clear all through the Siddur, the connection to the land. So it's interesting to see it, in the actual practical sense that, okay, we've just eaten and the land.
Yes, exactly.
Our land.
Now, interestingly, thank you for that, Sylvia. Interestingly, the prayer book or this prayer focuses on, the halakha says that a meal consists of eating a bread product. So, and yet just a couple of verses before, we talk about this being a land of wheat, barley. Okay, so you can make bread from those things, but also pomegranates and olives and dates and all these other wonderful things, figs. So of the the seven foods that are explicitly mentioned as from the land of Israel, only two of them can really be made into bread. That's wheat and barley. And yet, this prayer that we're about to look at is focused specifically on wheat and barley products, that is bread. Uh, that being said, there are numerous other prayers, not numerous, there are other prayers for other products, but we're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to only talk about the blessing that one says after eating bread. But everybody should know, and maybe we can subsequently discuss the other blessings. We should. We should probably look at the blessing you say after you drink wine, or the blessing that you say when you eat cake. You know, there's different examples of how one does the blessing afterward. But let's start looking at any other questions or comments that people want to raise. If not, then let's turn to Birkat Hamazon itself. I'm going to share a document that I generated actually a long time ago. I first made this in probably the year 2000 or so, maybe 1995. And I've been updating it a little bit here and there. And it's jam-packed, so I'm going to have to explain it. It's also, because it's so old, it's in a font that is really not necessary anymore. It's an early thing. So I'm going to show it to you in the zoom out way, and then we're going to zoom in and look at the text itself. Okay, so here is what we call Birkat Hamazon, the blessing of the food, right? Mazon is food. Hazan et ha'olam. Okay, so I have a subtext here. It says, Rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, yay God. And I explain, V'achalta v'savata u'verachta, which is what we just read. That's the pasuk, the verse from Deuteronomy. These are the big sections, and I want to go through them very quickly and not go into detail until we actually read them. First of all, this was made in the context of my work as a Hillel director, and so the focus there was explicitly Friday night and Saturday meals. And I wanted a guide. I have been working in the Reform movement before that as a college outreach person. And I knew that students would go to these campuses and suddenly be exposed to Orthodox Jewish life and feel really bent out of shape because everything that they thought was their Jewishness, or what they thought was Judaism, was suddenly insufficient in the eyes of the conservative and Orthodox students who had day school educations and believed that the only way to do it was to do it with completeness, right, and fullness and not question. And so the Reform kids were always in a very uncomfortable position. So I wanted to create a guide for the prayer that was very detailed, functioned within the Reform realities of limited Hebrew knowledge, and so with transliteration, and that was explanatory so that students weren't just in the sea of, hearing, these Camp Ramah kids from the conservative movement or the Orthodox kids who were energetic recite this prayer with incredible enthusiasm and engagement. Anyone who's ever seen this done knows that it's a lot of fun and the kids are having a great time, or the community is having a great time at the Shabbos dinner table or lunch table. It's a big event unto itself. And this is probably why, Pamela, if you want to mention why, probably one of the reasons why you were interested in this is because you've seen this done, and it is a big deal, and we should be looking at it as Reform Jews. Reform liturgy is usually far more limited. So here it is in the context specifically of not a weekday, but rather Shabbat, and in its fullness. So on Shabbat and holidays, you start with a psalm, and then you have what's called the Zimun, or an invitation to prayer. and we'll look at that in a moment. Then what you have is 4 essential paragraphs. Number 1 for sustenance. Number 2 for the land. So there you go. We were saying v'achalta v'savata uverachta et Hashem Elokecha. Right? This sentence that says you shall eat, you shall be satisfied, you shall bless God for the land. So, and Ramban, we just said, speaks about the dual purpose of this prayer. One is for being sustained, and the other is for the land itself. And we'll talk about why these names are there as well. And then there's a third paragraph that's important for Jerusalem, right? And then there's a final paragraph that's essential, which is for the goodness. And in addition, there are other paragraphs that we skipped over here. There's one for Shabbat that's really an addition for number 3. Let me, and I'm going to zoom in a little more. And there's also one for Rosh Chodesh, see, for on Shabbat only. And then this one is on Rosh Chodesh. And it's not in black because this is, when I did this a long time ago, I wanted to indicate that this could be skipped over because it's not essential to everyday prayer. It's really for specific moments. But these other parts, here's the end of the third paragraph, right? Uvnei Yerushalayim. And then the 4th paragraph for goodness. And then, of course, we go into a whole bunch of special additions, special prayers, as I wrote, Harachamans, the endless Harachaman. And, I put a teaser in here. What are your personal and communal hopes? In the spirit of my teacher, Richard Levy, Alav Hashalom. So this is the basic outline of Birkat Hamazon. And then there's a short version, but we'll talk about that later. Any comments on the overall structure before we go on? Let me stop the share. Questions or comments about what we just looked at? All right, we'll keep going then. Let's go back to the share window. And I think it makes sense for us to look at the very beginning. So I'm going to zoom in because I'm guessing you guys can't really see it that well. Okay. You can see that my style of transliteration has changed since 1998. I have a lot more L-RDs because I was hyper vigilant about not writing God's name out. But things have changed in terms of the very specifics as I've become more knowledgeable, to be completely honest about that. So in the Shabbat and Chag context, one says Psalm 126 before beginning Birkat Hamazon. And it's usually sung. The most common one that I learned growing up goes like this. Shir Hamalot B'Shuv Adonai Et Shivat Zion Hayinu Kecholmim Az Yemales Chok Pinu Uleshonenu Rina Az Yomru Vagoyim Higdil Adonai Lasoti Melech Higdil Adonai Lasoti Manu Hayinu Smechim Shuva Adonai Et Shivitenu Ka'afikim Ba'negev Hazorim Bedim Aberina Yikzoru Haloch Yelechu Vacho Nose Meshech Noshe Meshech Hazara Bo Yavo Verina Nose Alumotav. That's really it. And then some people add additional verses that come from Psalms 145, 118, 115, and even 106. But Psalm 126 reminds us that Shabbat is me'ein olam haba, a taste of the world to come, hearkening to a perfected future. Ma'alot are steps. This psalm was recited as pilgrims ascended the beautiful temple steps, temple steps in Jerusalem. A beautiful biblical metaphor appears here. And I want to highlight that right here. I'm going to highlight it by enlarging. Whoops. And I'm going to highlight it over here as well by enlarging. This is the trick of having your own text here. I love this because it's written into the psalm as a chiastic work. It is, in other words, ABBA. Hazorim bedim berina yiktsoru. O-E-E-O. That's in Hebrew. In a world when rhyming was not a part really of the Torah or of the biblical tradition, you have embedded this beautiful in structure, and we're about to say beautiful in meaning line in Psalm 126. Hazorim, one who sows, as in puts seeds out. Zera is seed. Hazorim bedim'ah, one who sows with tears, will harvest with joy. So as we experience suffering, we will nevertheless at some point get through our suffering and experience the joy. It's an affirmation that even when things are difficult, there is every reason to believe that we can get through this because God is with us, because we have inner strength, because we are resilient. And I think that this line in particular has been one of my favorite lines in all of the tradition, because it just is a reminder when things are hard that there's actually a way that we can get through it. And it's in such a beautiful metaphor here. It's talking about when we are down and out, we sow with tears, right? As we're crying, we plant a better future. And eventually we have this promise that we'll be able to harvest that joy. How beautiful in this psalm. I love it because it's visual. I love it because it's rhyming. I love it because it's first and foremost affirming that we can get through the hard stuff. And I think of this a lot when I think about mourning, grief, and loss, that sometimes we are going to get through it, but we don't know it. That we can get through it. At the very least, our inner sanctuary can be healed even as we have experienced suffering. Like if you look at this, we could talk about the ma'alot, right? It's Shir HaMa'alot. I mentioned it in my reference here. Ma'alot are steps or they're literally steps on a ladder. Ma'alot, things that allow you to ascend. Ole, right? It's this word, like an aliyah. So you're walking up the steps. If any of you have been to Jerusalem and have spent time in the old city and have gone to the southern excavations of the Western Wall, right? Or it's not the Western Wall, but it's the southern wall of the temple. I think, Sylvia, you and I went there. Those steps are amazing to see on the southern excavations. I don't know what they call it now. They have a better name. It's like the
Davidson Center.
Davidson Center, right.
And it's by the Holder Gate.
Yes. So it's pretty amazing because each of the steps is of different sizes. And so if you are a pilgrim on your way up those steps to go into the Beit HaMikdash, into the temple, you have to walk with thoughtfulness. You can't just sprint up those steps, right? Because each of those steps is an act of elevation. So that's what Shabbat is. Shabbat is a way in which we are not rushing to get to the top. We are savoring every step that we take in making Shabbat holy and making it meaningful in our lives. That's the ethos of Shabbat. And so we're not going to run up these steps. We're going to go each step up as we ascend higher and higher, as the Moshav band says. If you don't know that song, look it up, Higher and Higher. I love it. We're going on our way to this new level. And in that space, we were like dreamers. We were feeling the sense of dreams, it says. So anyway, we could look at all of this, and we should, and we're running out of time. But again, even with all of that, it's this line that blows me away. Hazorim bedima berina yiktsoru. A beautiful statement and affirmation of life. So I think we should stop here because we could talk a lot. What I'll do is I'll send on our our WhatsApp group, I will send out a link. And maybe I'll also, when this recording is done, I'll put it in the YouTube channel, a link to this document, as a PDF, so you can have it when we're studying. Any last questions questions?
Thank you so much.
So I have been really stressed over this at my shul because of all the ridiculousness in the kitchen and stuff, and the fact that I can't see, So I have Googled over and over again, large print. I just found one, and it's a PDF. I'm like in tears here. It's like a miracle. It's the Jewish Blind Institute. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Of course, yes. They have great
I will
resources.
send this to you, and I don't know. I'm verklempt. I'm very emotional. So just talk amongst yourselves.
That's fine. And Sylvia, all of the things that I do are digital, and I can enlarge them for you, and you can have them, and we can laminate them. We can do whatever you want, because you should always feel included.
Well, and this thing, it's apparently the USY, which is what my shul has. The books are falling apart. They're out of print, but this is what they do, so I can actually participate. And I'm really, all right, guys.
I think that's actually very interesting. Maybe I should reach out to them and say, hey, would it help for you if I take some of my materials that I've done and make them enlarged? It would be very easy for me to enlarge anything. I click a couple buttons and it enlarges. It might be some formatting challenges, but we can get through it.
All right. Well, I will send it to you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else?
Bye.
All right. We'll keep going next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.